"Do not make a scene," he whispered, leaning close enough for only her to hear. As if the humiliation was already hers to manage, she sat there, surrounded by comfort that was never meant for her, holding a pen that felt heavier than it should. Everyone expected tears. No one expected clarity. They mistook her restraint for weakness. They mistook her silence for surrender. And when she walked away without protest, they believed the story was over. It was not. Because the moment she left, the foundation they never questioned began to crack. And the woman they underestimated did not disappear. She reorganized, quietly. Before we go any further, tell me where you are listening from. Your city, your country. If this story resonates with you, leave a comment and subscribe to stay with us for what comes next. The Christmas hall of the Ashford estate glowed with gold and crystal, yet Celine felt none of its warmth. Soft jazz floated through the air, smooth and indulgent, as if designed to soften every sharp edge. It failed. She sat alone at the long central table, her posture straight, her hands folded loosely in her lap. The pastel yellow silk of her dress caught the light, making her appear almost fragile among the guests dressed in darker, heavier colors. Conversations drifted around her in hushed tones, pauses forming whenever eyes slid briefly in her direction. Celine did not look up. She did not need to. She had learned over 5 years how silence could speak louder than words. At the front of the hall, Kalis stood on a small raised platform, a champagne glass in one hand. His other arm rested possessively around Vespera's waist. Vespera's wine-red dress clung to her figure, confident and deliberate, as if announcing her victory before the words were spoken. Olympe sat nearby, composed and observant, her gaze cool as it passed over Celine and moved on, as though she were already absent. Kalis cleared his throat. The music softened, then faded. "My friends," he began, smiling as if offering a gift. "Tonight is about honesty and renewal. I believe in clean endings." A ripple of polite laughter followed. He looked directly at Celine for the first time that evening. His eyes held no hesitation. "I have decided to grant Celine her freedom. We are ending our marriage tonight." The word ending landed with calculated gentleness, like a blade wrapped in silk. "There is no need for drama," he continued. "This is mercy. She can return to a simpler life, to the world she understands." Vespera leaned slightly into him, her smile sharp. A few guests glanced toward Celine, then away, as if watching might be improper. A folder slid across the table in front of Celine. Vespera's manicured fingers pushed it closer, along with a pen. "Sign quickly," she said lightly. "We are about to cut the cake." Celine's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. The room felt suddenly smaller, the air heavier. She picked up the pen. For a brief moment, her hand trembled. The first tear fell before she noticed it, warm against her cheek. Then another followed, slower this time. Kalis bent toward her, his voice low enough to feel intimate. "Do not beg," he whispered to him. "It looks desperate." She did not answer him. Inside, something unexpected loosened. The tears were real, but they were not what he believed them to be. Celine was not mourning a loss. She was releasing a weight she had carried in silence. 5 years of being unseen. 5 years of being tolerated rather than chosen. The cold distance, the careful exclusions, the way success was always described as his achievement. Her tears were not for him. They were for herself and for the quiet relief spreading through her chest. She signed. The pen moved with steady pressure, her name clear and unmistakable. When she finished, she placed the pen down carefully, aligning it with the edge of the paper. She lifted her gaze to Kalis. Her eyes were still wet, but her expression had changed. "You are right," she said softly. "I am crying." He smiled, certain of his power. "Because," she continued, her voice calm, "this is the first moment in years that I can breathe." The smile on his face faltered, just slightly. Celine rose from her chair. She smoothed the front of her dress, her hand brushing briefly over her stomach. A gesture so small, it went unnoticed by most. Chairs shifted. Someone inhaled sharply. The room seemed unsure how to react now that she was no longer seated where they had placed her. She walked toward the doors without rushing. Her heels echoed against the marble floor, each step measured. Behind her, the cake was cut. Glasses clinked. Life resumed its performance. At the threshold, she paused for half a second, not to look back, but to steady herself. Then she pushed the doors open and stepped into the cold night air. The doors closed behind her. Inside the hall, Kalis stared at the space she had left, unsettled by a feeling he could not name. Outside, Celine drew in a deep breath. The winter air sharp in her lungs. Her tears had stopped. What remained was clarity. This was not an ending. It was the moment the prison door opened. Snow fell steadily as the black Rolls-Royce Phantom came to a smooth stop at the edge of the estate. The driver stepped out first, opening the rear door without a word. Celine paused only briefly before entering, her breath visible in the cold air. The door closed behind her with a soft, final sound that cut off the music, the laughter, and the entire world she had just left. Inside the car, warmth surrounded her. The silence felt deliberate, protective. Celine leaned back against the leather seat and closed her eyes for a moment. Her chest rose slowly as she exhaled. When she opened them again, the softness that had filled her expression in the hall was gone. In its place was clarity, focus, control. A man sat across from her, composed and attentive. Taddeo removed his gloves and set them aside before speaking. He was in his late 50s, his presence quiet but precise. He had been Celine's legal advisor for years, long before she became Mrs. Ashford. He had always addressed her with respect, even when others did not. "Are you all right?" he asked. Celine accepted the warm cloth he offered, pressing it gently to her cheeks. "I am," she said. "Better than expected." The car began to move, tires gliding over snow. Streetlights passed in slow rhythm outside the tinted windows. Taddeo glanced at a tablet resting on his knee. "Kalis transferred $500 to your personal account 10 minutes ago," he said evenly. "The memo reads transportation support. He also froze all shared credit lines." Celine's lips curved into a faint smile that did not reach her eyes. 500, she repeated. "That is generous of him." "He believes it sends a message," Taddeo said. "It does," Celine replied. "Just not the one he intends." She straightened slightly, adjusting the fold of her coat over her stomach. Her hand lingered there, protective and steady. "Proceed," she said. Taddeo nodded. "At your instruction, I am ready to activate Aurora." The words settled between them with quiet weight. "Yes," Celine said. "Initiate Protocol Aurora tonight. Revoke my intellectual access rights from all Ashford Tech servers. Full withdrawal. No warnings." Taddeo hesitated only long enough to confirm. "Once executed, the systems will degrade quickly. Without your continuous updates, their core architecture will destabilize." "I know," Celine said. Her voice carried no bitterness, only certainty. "That architecture was mine." As the car moved deeper into the city, memory pressed gently against her thoughts. Long nights lit by the glow of a laptop screen. Lines of code rewritten while the rest of the house slept. Her body heavy with pregnancy, her focus sharper than ever. She remembered pausing only to sip water or steady herself when exhaustion crept in. She remembered Kalis returning late, the scent of perfume that was not hers lingering in the air. His praise reserved for meetings and cameras. She had never asked for credit. She had asked only for space to work. Taddeo watched her carefully. "He does not know who Aurora belongs to," he said. Celine looked out the window as snow blurred into white streaks. "He never knew who I was either," she replied. The car slowed at a red light. Celine's reflection appeared faintly in the glass. Her face was calm. There was no trace of the woman who had sat alone at the table. She placed her palm over her stomach again, this time with intention. "We are not hiding," she whispered, though she knew Taddeo could hear. "We are preparing." The light changed. The car moved forward. Behind them, the Ashford estate disappeared into the falling snow. Ahead, the city waited, unaware that its balance had already begun to shift. Celine closed her eyes, not in retreat, but in resolve. For the first time in years, the road before her felt open. 3 months later, the top floor of Ashford Tech felt smaller than it used to. Kalis paced behind his desk, his jacket discarded on the chair, his tie loosened in frustration. The city stretched beyond the glass walls, bright and distant, yet none of it seemed within reach. A group of engineers stood in front of him, stiff and silent, their eyes lowered. "This does not make sense," Kalis snapped. "The system ran flawlessly for years. Nothing like this happens without incompetence." One of the engineers cleared his throat. "The core algorithms are no longer updating. Several adaptive functions have stopped responding. We are patching issues manually, but it is temporary." "Temporary is not acceptable," Kalis said. "Fix it." The man nodded, though his expression suggested he already knew the limits of that order. When the room emptied, Kalis dropped into his chair. He stared at the screen on his desk, lines of alerts blinking red. Investors were calling, partners were delaying contracts. He told himself it was a phase, a minor disruption. He had always been the face of the company. That was what mattered. The door opened without a knock. Vespera entered with confident steps, a large diamond ring catching the light as she lifted her hand to adjust her hair. Her engagement ring. She glanced around the office, unimpressed by the tension. "You look exhausted," she said, settling onto the sofa. "We need to talk about the wedding planner. She says the venue I want requires an additional deposit." Kalis rubbed his temples. "Not now." Vespera frowned. "You said the company was stable, that things would be even better without her." "They will be," he replied sharply. "These numbers are temporary." She crossed her legs, studying him. "Temporary does not pay for a lifestyle. I did not agree to wait." Before he could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and hesitated before answering. "Mother." Olymp's voice came through strained and urgent. "Kalis, what is happening with the stock?" He straightened. "What do you mean?" "It is falling," she said. "Not gradually, rapidly. There are rumors." Kalis felt a chill move through him. "What rumors?" "A fund," Olymp continued. "Aurora. They are quietly buying distressed debt connected to Ashford Tech. Banks are listening to them." He stood abruptly. "That is impossible. No one moves that fast without insider knowledge." There was a pause on the line. "Then explain why the board is asking questions you cannot answer," Olymp said. The call ended. Kalis stared at the phone in his hand. For the first time, doubt edged past his certainty. He thought of Celine only briefly, dismissing the thought as irrelevant. She had been background, supportive, replaceable. The assistant announced another meeting request. He waved it away. Later that evening, the office emptied, leaving only the hum of machines. Kalis remained, staring at projections that no longer followed logic. He told himself that leadership was about presence, about confidence. He had those in abundance. He did not notice the absence of something deeper. Across the city, Celine stood in a quiet apartment, reviewing reports with calm precision. The glow of a laptop reflected in her eyes as numbers aligned exactly as she had predicted. She felt no thrill, only confirmation. This was not revenge, it was consequence. She closed the file and rested her hand on her stomach, feeling the steady reminder of what truly mattered. The company was beginning to reveal what it had always been beneath the surface. Without her, the glass tower could not hold, and soon everyone would see the cracks. The restaurant overlooked the river, its tall windows reflecting the city lights like a promise of stability. Kalis arrived early, choosing a table near the glass, where he could be seen and admired. He adjusted his cufflinks twice, reminding himself that appearances still mattered. They always had. Vespera joined him moments later, wearing a deep blue dress that shimmered subtly under the warm lighting. She moved with practiced elegance, greeting the hostess by name, as if she already belonged in every exclusive space she entered. When she sat, she placed her phone on the table, face down, and smiled. "This place is perfect," she said. "It tells people we are still in control." Kalis nodded. He wanted to believe her. "Aurora would not meet us here if they did not respect what we built." Vespera tilted her head. "What you built," she corrected gently. He ignored the shift and reached for the menu, though he did not read it. His thoughts circled around the same questions he had avoided for weeks. How much did Aurora know? How quickly they were moving? Why the banks had suddenly changed their tone? The man arrived without announcement. Tadeo stood beside the table, his posture calm, his expression unreadable. He wore a tailored coat and carried no visible documents, as if he did not need them. "Mr. Ashford," he said. "Miss Vespera, thank you for meeting with me." Kalis rose, extending his hand. "We appreciate the interest. Ashford Tech has always welcomed strategic partners." Tadeo shook his hand briefly and took the seat across from them. "Aurora is not a partner," he said. "We are an investor." Vespera smiled, leaning forward. "Investors usually like to feel inspired." Tadeo met her gaze without reaction. "Aurora prefers results." A waiter approached, but Tadeo declined with a small gesture. "We will keep this brief." He placed a folder on the table, sliding it toward Kalis. "Aurora is prepared to inject substantial capital into Ashford Tech, enough to stabilize operations and restore market confidence." Kalis felt relief surge through him. He opened the folder, scanning the first page. The numbers were generous. More than generous. "This could save us," he said, unable to hide his satisfaction. Vespera reached for his arm. "I knew your reputation would carry us through." Tadeo allowed a pause before continuing. "There are conditions." Kalis looked up. "Of course." Aurora will oversee a full restructuring of the board, Tadeo said. Operational transparency will be mandatory. Emergency shareholder meetings will be scheduled within 30 days. Vespero's smile tightened. That sounds invasive. It is necessary, Tadeo replied. Confidence requires clarity. Kalis closed the folder, considering. He had always believed control was about being visible, about commanding a room. Paperwork had never interested him. These terms are standard, he said finally. We can handle them. Tadeo pushed a pen across the table. Then we can proceed. Vespera hesitated, scanning the pages more closely than Kalis did. Her eyes lingered on the fine print, lines she did not fully understand but sensed were important. Perhaps we should review this with counsel, she said. Kalis waved her off. We do not have time for caution. This is our way out. He signed. Vespera watched the pen move across the page. For a brief moment, uncertainty flickered in her expression. Then she signed as well. Tadeo collected the documents, standing smoothly. You will receive formal notice of the shareholder meeting within the week. As he turned to leave, Kalis called after him. Tell Aurora we are grateful. Tadeo paused, looking back with a neutral expression. Aurora does not require gratitude, and he said, only compliance. When he was gone, Vespera exhaled slowly. That felt rushed. Kalis leaned back, confidence returning. We needed momentum. Besides, everything improves without certain influences. She studied him. You still believe she was the problem? He smiled. Do you not feel lighter without her shadow? Vespera did not answer immediately. She lifted her glass, watching the wine catch the light. As long as the money flows, she said. Outside, the river moved steadily, indifferent to the decisions being made above it. Across the city, Celine reviewed the signed documents with measured calm. Tadeo stood nearby, waiting. They did not read carefully, he said. They never do, Celine replied. Her voice carried no triumph, only certainty. They confuse confidence with understanding. She closed the folder and set it aside. Prepare the meeting. It is time for them to learn the difference. The boardroom on the top floor of Ashford Tech had always been designed to impress. Floor-to-ceiling glass framed the city in sharp clarity, a reminder of height, reach, and control. That morning, the room felt different. The air was tense, filled with expectation that leaned too heavily toward hope. Kalis sat at the head of the table, his shoulders squared, his expression carefully neutral. He had rehearsed confidence in the mirror before arriving, reminding himself that leadership was about presence. Around him, the board members whispered among themselves, voices low, glances frequent. Olympe sat to his right, elegant and still, her hands folded neatly as if order alone could stabilize the moment. Vespera entered last. Her heels clicked against the polished floor with deliberate rhythm. She wore a tailored outfit chosen to signal authority, not celebration. As she took her seat beside Kalis, she placed her hand lightly on his arm, a gesture meant to be reassuring, though her eyes betrayed impatience. They will arrive, she murmured. This is how serious people operate. Kalis nodded. Aurora understands urgency. Minutes passed. The city outside remained indifferent, traffic flowing as it always had. Inside the room, a quiet settled that felt heavier with each second. A board member cleared his throat. Has anyone confirmed the identity of Aurora's chair? One of them asked. Kalis answered quickly. They prefer discretion. Olympe shifted her gaze toward him. Discretion is not the same as absence, she said calmly. Before he could respond, the door opened. Tadeo stepped inside first, composed and unhurried. Conversation stopped immediately. His presence carried authority without performance, a contrast that unsettled more than one person at the table. Good morning, Tadeo said. Thank you for your patience. Kalis stood. We were expecting Aurora's leadership. You are, Tadeo replied. He stepped aside. Celine entered the room. For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The silence was complete, sharp enough to feel deliberate. Celine walked forward with quiet assurance. Her hair was styled in the familiar, half-up arrangement, though this time a diamond pin caught the light with restrained brilliance. She wore a pastel yellow dress designed for her pregnancy, tailored with precision, balanced by a white blazer resting easily on her shoulders. Her posture was calm, her presence undeniable. Kalis rose halfway from his chair, then froze. Celine, he said, disbelief breaking through his practiced composure. You are in the wrong place. This is a board meeting. She did not look at him. Her eyes moved briefly across the room, acknowledging faces she recognized. Others she did not. Then she reached the head of the table, the seat Kalis occupied. She paused, removed her sunglasses, and set them gently on the table. Only then did she meet his gaze. "Please," she said evenly, "take your seat." Kalis laughed once, sharply. "This is not a charity event. You do not belong here." Solene waited. The pause stretched long enough to draw attention from every corner of the room. Then Thaddeus spoke. "Allow me to clarify," he said. "Selene West is the chair of Aurora Holdings." The words landed without force, yet their effect was immediate. A murmur rippled through the room. Papers shifted. Someone inhaled audibly. Olymp's expression tightened, her composure faltering for the first time. Kalis shook his head. "That is impossible." Solene stepped forward and sat down. Not beside him. In his chair. She folded her hands on the table, her movements unhurried. "This meeting will come to order," she said. Her voice was calm, controlled, and unmistakably authoritative. Vespera stared at her, eyes narrowed. "You expect us to believe this," she said, "that you suddenly own a fund capable of buying us out." Solene glanced at her briefly. "Not suddenly," she replied, quietly. She nodded once toward Thaddeus. He activated the screen behind them. The Aurora logo appeared, followed by a series of charts and figures that moved with precise clarity. Percentages shifted. Ownership structures resolved into undeniable truth. 60%. The room fell silent again. Kalis felt the floor tilt beneath him. His mind searched for arguments, for explanations that would restore balance. None arrived. "You were never meant to see me coming," Selene said, her gaze steady on him now. "You mistook silence for absence. You mistook patience for weakness." She leaned back slightly, her hand resting protectively over her stomach. "This company no longer belongs to your reflection." Her eyes moved to the board. "It belongs to its future." No one spoke. For the first time since the night of the gala, Kalis had no words ready. The confidence he had relied on failed him completely. Solene did not smile. She did not need to. The boardroom did not breathe, it waited. Kalis was the first to move, pushing his chair back as if sound alone could restore his authority. He straightened his jacket, smoothing an invisible crease, and forced a smile that did not reach his eyes. "This is a misunderstanding," he said, addressing the room rather than Solene. "Ownership structures can be temporary. Funds appear and disappear all the time. What matters is operational leadership." Solene remained seated, her posture composed, her hands resting lightly on the table. She did not interrupt him. Her stillness unsettled more than any protest could have. Kalis continued, encouraged by the sound of his own voice. "This company was built on vision, on risk, on relationships I cultivated. You cannot buy that with numbers alone." Vespera leaned forward, eager to reclaim ground. "And let us be honest," she added, her tone sharp but controlled. "Money does not equal understanding. Anyone can acquire assets. Running a tech company requires expertise." A few board members shifted in their seats. No one agreed aloud. Solene picked up the pen resting near her hand. It was black, simple, its weight familiar. She turned it slowly between her fingers, listening, watching. She recognized the pattern unfolding before her. The louder they spoke, the more they revealed. Kalis began pacing again. "You spent years in the background," he said, finally directing his words toward her. "Supporting roles do not prepare someone for leadership. This is not personal. It is reality." She met his gaze briefly, then looked away, as if considering something more interesting. Vespera scoffed softly. "Look at her," she said to the others. "She cannot even defend herself." Solene remained silent. The pen continued to turn between her fingers. The soft click of movement, the only sound she made. The room grew uncomfortable with the quiet. Kalis felt it pressing against him, urging him to fill it. "You see," he said, growing louder, "this is exactly the problem. Indecision, a lack of presence. Leadership requires force." At that, Selene smiled. It was small, restrained, almost kind. "Are you finished?" she asked. The question was not loud. It did not need to be. Kalis stopped pacing. "I am explaining the situation." "You are performing," Solene replied. Her voice was even, without edge. "There is a difference." She placed the pen down and folded her hands. "Your terminology is impressive. Unfortunately, your numbers are wrong." A murmur rippled through the board. Kalis frowned. "That is not possible." Solene nodded once toward Thaddeus. The screen behind them changed. Charts appeared, clean and precise. Ownership percentages, voting rights, transfer timelines. The information moved with calm inevitability, each slide confirming the last. Aurora Holdings, 60% controlling interest. Solene spoke again. As of last week, Aurora holds majority ownership. This was achieved through legally executed acquisitions and debt consolidation. The board restructuring clause you signed authorizes immediate enforcement. Kalis stared at the screen, his mouth slightly open. You are lying. Tadeo's voice cut through the tension. All documentation has been verified by independent counsel. Silence returned, heavier than before. Vespera stood abruptly. This is a setup. Solene looked at her. No, she said. This is due diligence. She turned back to Kalis. You believed visibility was power. You believed applause meant stability. You never asked who maintained the foundation. His hands clenched at his sides. You are enjoying this. Solene considered him carefully. I am correcting it. She rose slowly from her chair, the room following her movement without realizing it. I allowed you to speak because I wanted the board to hear you, to understand the gap between confidence and competence. Her gaze swept the table. Now you do. Kalis stepped toward her, desperation breaking through his anger. We can fix this. For the sake of the child. Solene took a step back, creating space without drama. Do not use my child as leverage, she said calmly. You forfeited that right. She turned to the board once more. Effective immediately, Kalis Ashford is relieved of his duties as CEO. A collective intake of breath followed. And Vespera, Solene continued, her tone unchanged, is terminated pending investigation into misuse of company funds. Vespera froze. You cannot do that. Solene met her stare. I already have. She sat back down, the meeting continuing around her as if guided by an unseen hand. The power shift was complete, not because she demanded it, but because the truth no longer needed defending. Kalis stood motionless, the room no longer responding to him. Solene picked up the pen once more, her expression serene. Silence, she had learned, was the most honest language of all. Solene rose from her seat and walked toward the screen, her movements unhurried, deliberate. The boardroom followed her without realizing it, eyes drawn to the calm authority she carried with no need for emphasis. Kalis remained frozen near the table, his earlier certainty reduced to shallow breaths and restless hands. You have all asked the same question, Solene said, her voice steady as she stopped beside the console. Why did Ashford Tech begin to fail the moment I left? No one answered. She placed her fingers on the keyboard. The touch was familiar, grounding. This was the space where she had always been strongest. Not in front of cameras, not at banquets. Here, Kalis took a step forward. You are trying to rewrite history, he said. The company was successful long before you walked away. Solene glanced at him, not with anger, but with quiet clarity. I did not walk away, she replied. I was pushed out. What followed was not sabotage, it was absence. She pressed a key. The screen changed instantly. Lines of code filled the display, cascading with clean precision. Some of the board members leaned forward instinctively, drawn by the clarity of structure unfolding before them. This, Solene said, is the core architecture of Ashford Tech's proprietary intelligence. Adaptive learning models, predictive optimization layers, security protocols that evolve faster than the threats they faced. She paused, letting the room absorb the scale of what they were seeing. At the center, she continued, typing one final command, is the signature you never bothered to look for. The code shifted. A line expanded, highlighted in quiet white against the dark background. Architect Solene W. The silence that followed was absolute. Kalis shook his head slowly. That proves nothing. Titles can be added. Solene turned to face him fully now. This signature is encrypted, she said. It is bound to my biometric authorization. Without it, the system defaults to legacy functions. She gestured toward the screen, which is exactly what happened when I revoked access. Understanding began to dawn across the table, uncomfortable and irreversible. You were never the creator, Solene said, her voice calm. You were the presenter. You stood in front of work you did not understand and called it vision. Kalis stepped closer, his voice dropping. You did this to punish me. I did this to reclaim myself, she replied. Desperation overtook him. He reached for her hand instinctively, the gesture reflexive, entitled. We can fix this, he said urgently. For the sake of the child. We are still a family. Solene stepped back, creating distance with quiet resolve. She reached into her bag and removed a folded document. The paper was worn at the edges. She held it up. The prenuptial agreement you insisted on, she said. You were very clear. Separate assets, separate ownership. Intellectual property remains with its originator. She looked directly at him. You protected yourself thoroughly. His face drained of color. You have no claim, she continued. Not to my work, not to my future, not to my child. She turned back to the board. Effective immediately, all proprietary systems developed under my authorship will continue operating under Aurora Holdings. Ashford Tech will retain licensing access under revised terms. A board member spoke carefully. And Mr. Ashford. Solene did not hesitate. He is no longer employed here. Kalis laughed weakly. You cannot erase me. I am not erasing you, Selene said. I am correcting the record. She shifted her gaze to Vespera, who had remained silent, her posture rigid. Your accounts have already been flagged, Selene added. Personal expenditures charged to corporate funds. The investigation will proceed. Vespera opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her confidence finally abandoned her. Solene returned to her seat, the room rearranging itself around her authority. Papers were gathered. Phones vibrated with incoming confirmations. The machinery of consequence had begun to move. Kalis stood alone at the edge of the room, no longer addressed, no longer central. He looked at Solene one last time, searching for something he could recognize. She did not look back. The truth had been written long before this moment. All she had done was make it visible. Morning light filtered through the glass lobby of Ashford Tech, softer than the sharp brilliance that usually ruled the space. It felt deliberate, almost restrained, as if the building itself understood that something had ended here. Security escorted Kalis and Vespera toward the exit without haste. Each carried a cardboard box filled with items collected in silence. A framed photograph, a tablet, shoes chosen for confidence rather than distance. Their steps echoed too loudly against the marble floor. Vespera broke the silence first. This is your fault, she said, her voice tight. You promised control. Kalis did not answer. His eyes were fixed ahead, his jaw clenched. The confidence that once shaped his posture had collapsed inward, leaving only fatigue. When he glanced back, he expected to see someone watching. No one was. The doors opened automatically, releasing them into the cool morning air. The city moved on without pause. Cars passed. People walked by with coffee in hand. The world had no interest in their downfall. Inside, Selene remained near the elevators, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. She watched only long enough to confirm they were gone. Then she turned away. Olympe approached her slowly, heels clicking in careful rhythm. Her composure had returned, though something brittle remained beneath it. Selene, she said softly. Please. Selene stopped. Olympe lowered her voice. The child, my grandchild. I never meant for things to go this far. Selene studied her face with calm detachment. She saw calculation layered beneath concern, habit masquerading as remorse. This child, Selene replied, will carry my name. Olympe inhaled sharply. Family matters. Truth matters more, Selene said, and truth has been absent for too long. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. My child will grow up without being measured against appearances, without being taught silence as survival. Olympe hesitated, searching for another approach. None came. Selene nodded once. A quiet conclusion. Goodbye. She walked toward the waiting car without looking back. The Rolls-Royce door closed behind her, sealing out the last remnants of the life she had left behind. As the car moved forward, Selene leaned back and allowed herself to breathe fully for the first time that morning. The city unfolded outside the window, alive with ordinary beginnings. She placed her hand over her stomach, feeling the gentle reassurance beneath her palm. This was not an ending shaped by loss. It was an arrival shaped by clarity. At Aurora Holdings, the day began without ceremony. Meetings were efficient, decisions were precise. Selene moved through the office with ease, her presence steady and unremarkable in the way true authority often was. Later, she stood alone near the windows, the skyline stretching before her. The pastel yellow of her dress caught the sunlight, warm and grounded. She did not feel victorious. She felt aligned. Thaddeus approached quietly. Everything is in place, he said. The transition is complete. She nodded. Thank you. He paused. What comes next? Selene smiled faintly. Growth, she said, and peace. That evening, she returned home to a space chosen entirely by herself. No photographs curated for display. No expectations imposed by others. She set her bag down and moved to the balcony, watching the sky shift toward gold and pale blue. She thought of the night she had walked out into the cold, tears freezing before they could fall. She thought of the silence that had followed her departure, heavy with misunderstanding. Now the silence felt different. It felt earned. Solene rested both hands over her stomach, her smile soft but certain. "We are free," she whispered. The city lights began to glow below, steady and patient. Above them, the sky held its color a little longer, as if honoring the quiet strength of beginnings that did not need applause. This was not revenge. This was dignity restored. Sometimes a story lingers not because of what was taken, but because of what was reclaimed. What you have just heard is not about victory in the loud sense. It is about the quiet moment when someone stops asking for permission to exist as they truly are. Power does not always reveal itself through force. Often, it shows up through patience, clarity, and the courage to choose oneself when no one else does. Many may recognize pieces of this journey: the silence that weighs heavier than words, the habit of mistaking restraint for weakness, the way certain systems reward appearance while ignoring substance. These are not distant ideas. They live in families, workplaces, and expectations we rarely question. If this story stirred something in you, a memory, a disagreement, or a sense of understanding, you are not alone. Your perspective matters, and sharing it may help someone else feel seen. Thank you for listening, for reflecting, and for staying until the end. Until next time.